fill in the blank. You're not getting any younger, so
go do what you want to do. Life is short.
Hey you! Yes, you! Welcome to the You're Not Getting Any Younger podcast, a podcast for people who want to disrupt their lives for a good reason, to make it count. I'm your host, Jen Glantz, and every week I'll drop a new episode with stories from real people just like you, who woke up one morning and decided to make big changes, starting with small things. We'll cover topics like entrepreneurship, love, failure, and self-care. Hey, you're not getting any younger, so let's make this an adventure. Ready? When you were a kid, what did your dreams look like? Were they watercolor and abstract, like a Picasso painting? Were they paper-mache masterpieces with glued-on feathers and buttons? Or were they simple? When you grew up, you wanted to be something other than what you are now. I know it. At 5, I wanted to be a kindergarten teacher. At 6, I wanted to be a poet. At 7, I wanted to be a librarian. At 8, I gave up wanting to be anything except a child forever. Sometimes I look at the people around me when I'm at a coffee shop, in line at the bank, or while stuck at a red light and study the profile of their faces, watch their eyes droop and their smile fade, and I can't help but wonder what happened to their childhood dreams. What happened to us all, to our game plans then, to our game plans now? Well, maybe they don't matter much. Maybe the only thing that matters is when one door shuts, it slams shut. We let the sound echo throughout our bodies, and then, well, sometimes we are forced to move back in with our parents then. And sometimes we're forced to get a third job then. And sometimes we're just forced to start over, start different, start again. This week's guest wanted to become a paleontologist, but somewhere along the way ended up as a famous DJ, before then ending up back home at her parents' house, before her story then took a turn and landed her into something bigger, better, and more meaningful than she ever expected. Meet Claire Salvo. She's a self-taught artist living in LA after spending 9 years living in New York City, working as a full-time DJ. Her work represents the intersection of art, storytelling, and social justice. I am so excited to have her on the show this week. Welcome to the show, Claire.
I've always identified as an artist, but actually the first thing I remember wanting to be when I grew up was a paleontologist.
No way. Wait, how did you even know what a paleontologist was?
I don't know. I remember being 6 or 7 and just having this fascination with digging things out of the ground and dinosaurs and things that were really, really old.
So you knew you wanted to do that. What kind of changed? What happened?
When I learned that I would have to teach, that I would have to probably be a professor, or there would be, a teaching aspect to that, and I wasn't just going to be traveling and digging up dirt all day. That changed my mind.
So very young, you knew the benefits and the perks of not having a job that would put you back in school forever.
Yeah, I think I never thought of it that way. It's true.
But when did you realize that you were an artist, or that drawing and art was something that was a huge part of your life?
Well, I'd say there have been 2 times. When I was applying to colleges, I thought, maybe I'll go to an art school. This is kind of what I've always done. And I looked at Savannah College of Art and Design, decided going to an art school felt a little bit too specific and almost suffocating, and that if I were forced or told to sit down and do art, that I would burn out and I wouldn't want to do it, and I was scared of that. So I ended up just applying to regular undergraduate schools, and I went to NYU for communications and only did 1 art class in my time at NYU.
Wow. So when you were growing up, because you mentioned that drawing to you was something you did before you walked, right? So when you were growing up, after you said, okay, paleontology is not going to happen for me, did you commit to yourself that, hey, I'm going to grow up to be an artist? Or did you just sort of say, this is what I love to do, but I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet?
I had no clue. When I went to NYU, I remember getting to school and looking through the list of majors within my program and thinking, I don't want to do any of these. So I switched within NYU to communications because it felt kind of general and relevant. But I didn't foresee myself in a career kind of under that vertical either. And music was something I fell into and just kind of ran with because I didn't have that vision going into school of what I wanted to do when I graduated.
When you were thinking, okay, music, maybe I'll do that, what was that thought process like? Because it seems sort of random, right?
I think everyone I grew up with who saw that I was doing music was probably confused and surprised. And I mean, I grew up playing instruments, but I never had any aspiration to pursue it professionally. And I was certainly not good enough at any instrument to be a musician in that respect. But I started producing music, and that was kind of my area of passion. I liked being behind the computer and kind of changing noises around and making arrangements. So I started doing that in 2007 while working in the business side of the music industry. And then that eventually led to a production DJ duo.
Yes, which I have so many questions about. But before we get there, what was going to college in New York City like?
It was amazing. It was amazing. Being in New York was something I wouldn't trade. And the second I got there, I felt like home.
Did you feel like it was an extremely big growing up opportunity because you're going to school in what everyone views as this magical, crazy city? Did you feel like you grew up really fast in college?
I think I made up for lost time. I grew up in a pretty conservative and kind of like slower pace city, or not even city, really town. Can't say I experienced a lot when I was in high school. So when I got to New York, I was doing like the club thing every weekend, going to see concerts, meeting people from so many different backgrounds, which was really eye-opening for me because I graduated high school with 36 kids.
What? So you went from 36 to a city of a couple million.
Yeah. I wanted that. I wanted to feel anonymous.
Mm-hmm. What was it like going to a new city, a new college, where you could start over and be anyone you wanted?
I don't think I really approached it that way. I don't think I went into it thinking, oh, I'm going to reinvent myself. But it was nice to be around people who didn't really know me, because at my high school, it was like everybody knew each other so well. And most people had known each other since they were 5 years old. It was a K through 12 school. So it was nice to be in a place where people didn't know every single detail about, that thing I did in 6th grade that was embarrassing.
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure. And when you went to NYU, you were in college. Did you do any art at all? Did you draw at all or anything like that?
I did one semester when I was studying abroad. Because I switched schools within NYU, I had to redo some courses that I had tested out of. So I was trying to kind of make up for time. So I would graduate in 4 years, and I didn't have room in my schedule for electives like drawing.
So were you okay with that?
Yeah, I was so into music and so just kind of enraptured by New York that I didn't really think about it.
So the music situation turned into something that completely changed your life. So you said you were interning in music. You realized you loved the production aspect of it. What happened next?
I was working at a music management company, and I had still been producing, making mashups. And I remember it was June of 2010, and one of the bands we were working with, they were recording their debut album in our office, which shared a space with a recording studio. And their digital marketing manager from Columbia Records had come along to do kind of like the social aspect of that day, so tweeting, and I was there to get coffee and do the intern work. And we started chatting, and I found out that she used to make mashups too, and so we started making music together. And we would kind of live this Batman-style parallel life where we would both work all day at our respective jobs. We'd be on AIM going back and forth. And then she would get off work and she'd come downtown. We'd go get dinner usually at this place on Broadway and 11th. And then we'd go back to my office and just burn the midnight oil making music.
What do you mean by mashups?
Combining 2 or more songs. Yeah. And it was like the right time. I think 2010, 2011, they were really popular. And there were a bunch of college blogs that were taking off, and they started posting our our work.
So you met this person and the two of you said one day, let's just get together, experiment, make some songs. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I'd say about 6 months after we started producing, we thought, well, we should like come up with a name so we can do something with this stuff. And then my partner designed a logo, and then we had it turned into an LLC, and things kind of went from there. In 2012, we quit our day jobs to do it full time because it was kind of like our secret until Billboard magazine did an article about us. I think they covered something we did at South by Southwest, which if you're trying to keep a secret in the music industry, the jig is up when you're in Billboard. So everybody was like, oh, this is what you've been doing.
So what was the name? How did you think of the name and what was it?
It was called the Jane Does. And we had wanted to play off this idea of anonymity because we'd both been in music for a few years and seen the way women were treated and viewed and kind of written off or sexualized. And we wanted to find a way to get around that and let the music speak. So we wanted to do something that would kind of be a nod to women, but not necessarily reveal what we looked like. So I was actually telling one of my best friends from home about this concept, and she said, what about Jane Doe? And I was like, oh my God, that's it. And if you pluralize doe, it looks like does.
Yeah.
So we just changed the spelling, which ended up working out because it was that phrase, the Jane Does, was like basically made up. So it was available on every platform. So we snatched it up. And for a long time, we didn't release pictures of ourselves, and people would refer to us as he.
Wow.
Because they didn't know. I mean, even the logo was feminine. The logo was kind of the Kappa logo with two women, obviously women, if you get what I'm saying, back to back. And people would say, he just released this, mashup. Yeah. People just didn't get it.
Did they just assume that because it was fun music and a mashup and DJs, it had to be a man?
Yeah.
A man?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wild. So when you started producing these songs, I mean, I'm just picturing both of you like in an office building in New York City with the lights kind of off.
Yeah, pretty much.
Figuring out how to do this. I mean, what did you do next? Like, how did you get people to listen to your songs? How did you go from producing to getting people to know who you were?
My partner came from a marketing background, and that was helpful. And I was kind of getting into that world. So together we kind of combined ideas, and we just did it like guerrilla style. I mean, we tracked down these blogs and we would reach out to them one by one, sending personal messages. For every 30 or 40 we'd reach out to, maybe 3 would respond and maybe 1 would post it. But then you keep the ones who post it were loyal. So they're kind of like your base, and you build this base of maybe 5 to 10 blogs that always post your music when it comes out. And there used to be a website called Hype Machine. It still exists, but it's not what it used to be. And it used to be kind of like a barometer for what's cool in music, like right now. And it pulls in from certain blogs, and then you kind of upvote things, and there's like a top 10 list. And basically, if you got in the top 5 on Hype Machine, you were getting emails from labels, and you were getting like tens of thousands of streams a day because that site just generated so much traffic. So we started having success on that website, and that's how people found us.
Were you on YouTube or anything like that? Was that big back then or not really?
It was. I don't think we really took advantage of it maybe the way we could have. We used it mostly to post like recap videos once we had accumulated enough footage. And sometimes we would do like Q&As and stuff.
You mentioned that you set up an LLC, so this became essentially a business for the two of you, right?
It was a business, yeah.
Was that weird transitioning from random friendship to now business partner?
It seemed to me like the friendship grew alongside the business. They were never really separate, and it wasn't like we were friends first and then grew this business together. They kind of went hand in hand. We obviously became best friends. We spent so much time together. We were in crazy circumstances together and traveled everywhere. I remember walking out of the bank after having done it and feeling like, wow, I'm 22 and I co-own a company, and,
What did that
was a good
feel
feeling.
like?
Like I never would have seen it coming.
Was there any hesitation or fear signing the paperwork to become an LLC and opening that bank account, or were you just like,
No.
That's great.
No, not at all. It was a relief because we thought it would kind of simplify things. Now we could have checks written out to the Jane Does, and we could deposit them in one bank account and not try and have to kind of split everything immediately.
What was the money coming to you for at that time?
Gigs. we started booking gigs. We would play around New York, and I remember the first show we had where we got paid to travel was in Syracuse. We at a fraternity house. We did a Halloween party. It was so fun. I mean, we couldn't have asked for a better first experience, really. And I remember sitting with my partner next to each other on this JetBlue flight from New York to Syracuse. And we looked at each other and we were like, someone is paying us to fly on an airplane right now. This is crazy.
Were you nervous going to that first gig?
I think so. It's funny. Nerves aren't what I remember. I remember being in the booth with someone dressed like Quail Man.
Yeah, it's like, how can you be nervous when it's like a Halloween party?
It was
right?
so fun.
That's so wild. So did you ever do a release where, because you said just kind of anonymous for a while, did you ever both come out and say, okay, this is us? And then what was the response to that?
We did start releasing photos. I don't remember making a big to-do of it. I think our first photo shoot was by a photographer named Shervin Linez. He's amazing. I remember what we were wearing, and we held balloons, and it was like super girly and innocent and fun.
How many concerts did you perform together?
I have no idea. We were the Jane Does for 5 years.
Wow.
So a lot. Yeah.
Wow. And where did you travel to? Like, what cool places?
We went to Mexico City a few times. I hope to go back one day. We went to France, Spain, Canada, all over the States. Yeah.
Did you sign with the label, or was it just the two of you?
No, it's just the two of us. We didn't make original music until kind of the end of our career together. So it was mostly mashups, which labels are run the other direction from.
Sure.
But it's okay. That was never our really aspiration.
You said this was in 2010?
With what we met. Mm-hmm.
I feel like back then having DJs wasn't as popular as it is now, right?
Definitely.
That's why this is, like, to me, extra cool, because now I feel like I don't even know all the DJs' names, but back then it was like a couple of people you knew, right?
Yeah, it has. We saw that change happen, and actually I think that was one of the reasons why we decided to walk away from it in 2015. When we started, fraternities were so excited. 2 girls, how cool. And it was definitely a niche thing. And we would tell people we were DJs, and I loved seeing their response, like, oh my God, it's amazing, it's so cool, tell me all about it. By the time we ended in 2015, everybody and their mom was a DJ.
Right.
Every fraternity had a kid who DJ'd, so they weren't bringing people in anymore. And I paid close attention to people's reactions when I would say I was a DJ.
What did they say back to you?
It was kind of like, it was... Towards the end, it got to be, I'd say the overwhelming response was, oh, you too.
Wow.
Oh, another one.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, because I really do feel like, I'm just thinking back to 2010. I was graduating college then, and I don't remember it being such a big thing. Mm-hmm. You know, I feel like it must have been almost like a very unique type of thing for you to do. You know, it's really crazy. I listened to one of the songs that you guys did called Lights Go Down this morning. It's the only reason I got out of bed, because it was so good.
Did you watch the video?
I did. Like, you go to like the yoga studio. Like, this stuff is so awesome. But one of the cool things I saw in the video that I've always wanted to ask a DJ is, what is it like when you're in the booth and everyone's jumping and your job is to like get the crowd going? What is that like?
That was, I think, one of the biggest differences between me and my partner. She was a natural born performer, so settings like that bring her to life, and she flips a switch and she's instantly like engaged and engaging people. And for me, I've never felt like inclined or inspired to stand in front of a bunch of people.
Yeah.
So at the beginning, that kind of situation would completely freak me out, and I would kind of just like pull back into myself and keep my eyes down in the booth. It took a lot of repeated exposure and practice to get comfortable with it, until eventually, you know, I was comfortable enough with the like technical side of DJing that I worried less about messing up, because I knew I could correct a mistake, and started focusing more on the audience and the energy from the audience. And it's the best feeling. it's interesting because there's such a mixed kind of bag of events. Sometimes we would do corporate things where people don't even know music's playing, and that's just, you know, we would entertain each other.
Right. I was like, what did you do in those situations?
And then there are times when it was just like a crowd we would never forget. And we would always identify the one person in the crowd who knew every single song and could sing along, even when it was like, you know, the most obscure thing that we loved. We'd find that person and kind of lock eyes. And I don't know if you've ever been to a Daybreaker dance party. We DJ'd a few of them in New York, and then I DJ'd a few by myself. And that to me stands out as the most engaged, energetic, enthusiastic audience ever that I've ever played to.
So if you don't know what Daybreaker is, it's a morning party. You feel like you're at a nightclub, but you go at like 6, 7 a.m. And it's a completely sober type of morning experience where people just come before work. There's a DJ, there's yoga, there's crazy other things that happen. They're themed, you dress up, and you just go wild. I went to my first one by myself. And after like 5 minutes of being completely weirded out and nervous, I walked right up to the front and just went wild, you know? And like, you're right, the energy is just insane. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I think people want to hear the music. They want to dance. I think everybody's kind of on the same page. It's not about, you know, bottle service and looking a certain way or thinking that you look a certain way. And, everybody just wants to have fun and relax and kind of shake it out of their systems before they have to sit at a desk for 8 hours.
Whenever you had a gig, was there ever a time when you were like, I'm just so tired, I don't want to do this?
Oh my God, yeah.
And if so, how did you get yourself into the zone of jumping up behind the booth and being like this force of energy?
That comes from the audience. I remember there was one weekend we had 3 shows in, I guess, 3 or 4 days. We flew from New York to Seattle. We played in Seattle that night. We flew from Seattle to Santa Barbara, which was 2 flights because Santa Barbara is a small airport. We played that night. And then the third night we had a show in Chico, at Chico State.
Wow.
And neither of us had actually Googled where Chico was.
I have no idea where it is either.
So we had flights to Sacramento, and we just thought, or it took 2 flights to get from Santa Barbara to Sacramento. So it was, I think it ended up being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7 flights in like 3 days. It was a lot. So we flew into Sacramento on this little prop plane, and I finally decided to Google Chico. And at this point we were exhausted because we'd been on so many planes. We'd been out every night. And I turned to Jen and I said, we're not going to just be able to hop in an Uber. It's an hour and a half away from here.
Oh my
So we
God.
landed, we had to rent a car. We drove, we were just like delirious, but the energy was amazing. And then the show ended. It was like 1 or 2 in the morning. We drove back to our hotel in Sacramento, an hour and a half away. We were like bumping house music in the car. Jen was trying to keep me awake. I was like, it was the one time I genuinely worried I was going to fall asleep at the wheel.
Wow.
We were so tired. Got back to our hotel, slept for 2 hours, got on a plane, went back to New York.
What does your body feel like after the end of a typical set?
There's kind of this buzz or this high afterwards, and usually we couldn't go to sleep right away. We were never the type to stay and party. We'd usually like go to a diner and get food. But it's hard to kind of, like, there's like a kind of a come down period because your ears are thumping, or maybe your head is hurting. And yeah, it's just this buzz.
What was it like being a female in this role?
Oh, great question. It was eye-opening. I don't think I had ever seen misogyny the way I saw it when I was in music. Maybe I had ignored it for a long time, or I hadn't really been confronted with it. But I got a crash course.
Was it mostly from people from shows or just the business in general?
All of it. I mean, there are sleazy people at record labels, at management companies, and there are I'd say the expectation as a female DJ is that you're going to stay late and party, and maybe the promoter has a chance, and you would never talk about being in a relationship or flaunting any of that because you wanted to at least give the perception of being like attainable. that somebody who's booking you has a chance.
Right, which is crazy because guys don't have to do that.
No.
You know?
Guys will stay late and party and fraternize, but there's never this expectation of, anything more than that. There was a time I remember in New York when we were on kind of a mixed lineup, and the guy who was playing after us came and started unplugging our equipment before we were done because he decided he wanted to go on. Yeah. Or this assumption that we don't know how anything works or how to set anything up because we're women. I mean, the sound guys, I think, were probably consistently the worst. Wow. Just, treated us like we were idiots.
Did you ever feel this urge to prove everybody wrong?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
It's probably what kept you going.
Yeah, but the tough thing is that as a woman, you have to be so conscious of how you're speaking to people because it is easily misconstrued as being a bitch.
That's the problem. I mean, that's the problem I have is that I switch from nice to bitch like that. I don't have that middle zone. Like, if you cross me, especially if you're a man, I will turn. Because I don't think they understand that middle.
Right.
Know?
I mean, if we would stick up for ourselves, but we had to be so careful because it was like we didn't want to ruin the relationship with the promoter and never get booked again or, have it reflect poorly on our booking agency. And as many times as we could, we would travel with a manager. So we didn't have to be, quote, the bad guys.
And was that usually a guy or a female?
It changed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Usually our managers were men. We traveled with Jen's former partner a few times, and she would kind of stand into that role.
Yeah. I feel like you need a third party who's not the talent to respond. Because it sucks being the talent and like the business person,
right.
Did the fame ever do anything to you?
That's generous.
Can only imagine.
No. I enjoyed having a platform, a small platform, and we both felt a responsibility to use it for good. Mm-hmm. We had a lot of women come up to us after we'd play and say, "Oh, I feel so inspired. I've never seen a female DJ before. I want to do this." Those were the best moments, definitely. And we also felt like it was our responsibility to speak out against the kind of sexist stuff we dealt with on a daily basis, regardless of the consequence.
When you were doing this, what did the people in your life say? Did your parents or friends say, like, what is this, Claire? How long is this going to last? Or were they like, this is freaking cool, keep going?
My parents were always supportive. I think most people were surprised because they thought of me as the artist, not a DJ or musician. Mm-hmm. But people thought it was cool. I remember going home to Pennsylvania on holiday breaks and, people were like, oh my. Of course, they're only seeing what you post online.
Of course.
So they're like, oh, you're crushing it. You're killing it. And I'm like, thanks so much. What you didn't see is that show we played to 0 people. Well,
so, I think you have a great point, especially that people think your life is so great. I mean, I'm sure if I followed you during this time, I would be like, damn, she travels everywhere. She has this amazing job. But what were some of the downsides of it?
There were a few shows that were really disheartening. It's funny, Jen, my former partner, really had like a spidey sense for which ones were going to be a complete disaster. Yeah. She could usually tell based on how they were promoted ahead of time. She's like, I have a bad feeling about this, and it usually turned out to be true. That's really difficult to travel. I remember we played a show in New Mexico and we traveled far to get there, obviously from New York, and it was just a total disappointment. And I mean, ultimately we made money, so it wasn't a complete waste, but it's tough to kind of swallow from an ego perspective.
How do you play to a crowd of 5 people?
I was never good at it. My partner was amazing. She still managed to turn it on, and for me, I just didn't even want to look. I just kept my head down, and I was just embarrassed. But that's part of being a true performer, is just not being bothered by it.
And it sort of humbles you, I guess. Like one night you play a show to 1,000, and then the next you have 3 people who show up, and I think it makes you realize, like, okay, this is life, and this is, I'm sure that definitely brought it back down to reality, which was awesome. So in 2015, things started to not work anymore? What happened at that point?
There were a few things. I think, like I said earlier, the scene changed.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was DJing, so there was maybe less of a niche for it. Our musical taste had changed and maybe grown apart a little bit, and the things we wanted to do creatively were a little bit different. And I think we both thought that it was time to pursue solo ventures.
Did you want to stay in music, or were you over
I
it?
did at first. I started, when that ended, I tried to DJ by myself and realized pretty quickly that the kind of the gimmick was that there were two of us. And physically we were so different. So it was just kind of people like wanted to look at us. By myself, I guess I don't have the same effect.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, I think there's a lot of DJ female duo groups, right? Even now. I don't think I know of any that are single.
I do know some. But I so appreciated having a partner, having someone to travel with and share that experience with. I would never have wanted to do it by myself.
So did you say, okay, I'm doing it by myself, it's not working, I'm done? Or did you try to find a new partner?
No, I kept hitting kind of dead end. And I said, okay, this is not my path. It's not happening for me. So I started just kind of working odd jobs in New York until I wanted to feel inspired again. And I felt kind of burnt out.
What kind of jobs did you work?
I was a nanny. I did some freelance social media stuff. Yeah, pretty much whatever I could do to pay the bills.
How are you feeling during that time?
Awful. Honestly. While in the midst of that, I had mono. So
you were literally
feeling
awful.
Quite literally feeling terrible. I wasn't eating properly. My stomach hurt all the time. You know, it was half that year was winter. So it was just, yeah, it was not a happy time.
Did you feel very lost?
Completely. Never in my life had I felt uninspired or like I didn't want to create, whether it was music, art. And that year, I didn't feel like making anything.
So, I mean, how did you pull yourself from that dark spot? You know, I think a lot of people have those experiences where maybe they've had a really lucky, great career that suddenly ends, or they've worked a job they thought they always wanted to work, and then it turns out it's not what they wanted, and they end up in this hole of just darkness. How did you pull yourself out?
I decided really quickly that I needed to leave New York, that I was just kind of doggy paddling and keeping my head afloat, but I wasn't living. You know, I wasn't going out, I wasn't doing things, mostly because I was running myself ragged with a bunch of different jobs, none of which were really sustaining the lifestyle I wanted. So I decided, I went on a trip to England. I came back. This was the end of August, and I said, I have to leave New York. And I think it was September 24th, so just 3 weeks later, my dad drove up from Pennsylvania with a minivan, and we just packed my stuff in and I left.
How did it feel to say a temporary goodbye to New York City?
It was weird. It just happened so fast, and in some way, I never saw myself leaving New York. It's just hard to imagine living anywhere else, but I also always knew that I wouldn't be there forever. Those two things don't seem like they go together, but I just knew I would never raise a family there. And that it was a place to be while I was young and energetic and kind of finding my way.
This happened to me. I don't know if it happened to you, but did you feel like when you were in New York and you would be walking around, when you were in like a dark spot in your life, when you'd be walking around, like everything would haunt you? Like you'd walk by a certain building and just remember a memory of that time and be like, okay, I need to leave this city because it just brings back so many different memories. Did that happen to you?
Yeah, it's kind of like a minefield. I think, I forget, it might have been Sex and the City, but some show made a comment about that really resonated with me, about just there being so many kind of triggers in New York. Yeah,
it's true. I mean, I even feel when I go back now and I walk by a certain part of town, I'm like, oh my God, get me out of here. Because I have these memories of this, and this, and it's, New York is beautiful while it's beautiful, but then it becomes haunting, you know?
Yeah, I just found that my patience for things that I had once found endearing ran out.
Like what?
Like standing like a sardine on a subway or having to lug my groceries back, you know.
Oh, yeah. So you moved back home and you moved back into, what, your childhood house? And what was that like?
Something I never thought I would do. It seemed like such the millennial way to move back in with, they call us the boomerang generation, to move back in with mom and dad. And I always thought, oh, that'll never be me. And there I was.
Oh, yeah. It's happened to me, too. We've all been there. We've all been there.
But I really needed it. I needed to relieve the pressure of rent and just the rat race of New York and just like take a deep breath, think, okay, what do I want to do? I need focus. I need direction. And it was the right place for that.
Did you feel embarrassed?
No.
Because I'm sure I know a lot of people who moved back home, moved back into their parents' house. That was me a couple years ago. And it was probably one of the hardest times of my life because you feel like you don't know how this is going to end, right?
Yeah.
Like you're literally back where you started and you're like, what's going to happen next?
I framed it as kind of a layover.
Ooh.
That I knew I wasn't going to be there long because it's not the place for me. I knew that growing up. I knew it even more as soon as I left. It was just a place I had to be to get it together and figure out the next thing, and then I was going to be gone.
I love the layover idea. A long layover. That's what people say.
A 6-month layover, yeah.
So when you were home, what kind of things did you do to start to feel inspired, to figure out your path next? What did you do?
So the first couple weeks I was home, I thought to myself, okay, what is my purpose? What do I think I've been put here to do? And it was art. That's when I finally came back to art.
How did that click?
I think I just was thinking, what am I best at? I love music. It's not what I'm best at. I'm not like a savant or a prodigy.
Which must have been hard to admit to yourself because music was a huge part of the last 5 years of your life.
Yeah, I mean, I was always aware of it because I was surrounded by so many talented producers and musicians, and I thought, I am not in this league. I'm good enough to sustain a career and enjoy it, but it's not my calling in life. So I just thought, what am I best at? It's art. And it was an interesting time politically and to be in my hometown because it was right before the election and my town is really conservative. So there was kind of this energy, this anti-immigrant, the things that people in coastal cities would see on the news is what I lived for 6 months. And my mom came into my room one day. She said, what if you drew some of the refugees in Lancaster? So my hometown has a huge refugee population, which is interesting considering its political leanings. But it has a lot to do with how kind of religious that area is. I think churches and other religious institutions feel an obligation to help those in need, which oftentimes is refugees. I said, that's a great idea. And my mom had been volunteering with the Church World Service, which is a national refugee resettlement organization. They have a big office in my hometown. So we drove in there one day. And this is the kind of thing that just never could have happened in New York because it's too crazy. There's too many people. But things in my hometown are just easier. Yeah. So we drove in one day. And I basically gave a quick pitch before I really had a clue what I was doing. And
what did you pitch to them?
I said I wanted to photograph, draw some refugee families.
And what did you think you were going to do with those drawings or photographs?
I wasn't completely sure. I knew I wanted to tour them and travel with them. And that was about all I knew. And I put together something a little more formal and got the kind of a formal approval. And that set the wheels in motion. But that was the beginning of my trip back into art.
Was photography always a passion of yours, or was that something that you took on?
I use photos as references, and I wanted to own the entire project, so I wanted to take the pictures. And I had kind of a vision in mind of what those pictures would look like, but I don't know the first thing about photography. I mean, I have an eye for it, and I can use my phone, but I don't know anything about exposures or cameras or any of that science.
But you taught yourself, and I feel like that's who you are. I mean, even with DJing, like you didn't really know everything about that either, but you sort of just threw yourself into it, right? So what did they say when you went to pitch?
The woman there, her name is Stephanie, she loved the concept. She had to get it approved by her boss, and they did, and they were able to introduce me. They sent out kind of a call to a bunch of caseworkers and said, would any of your families be interested in participating in this project? We have a local artist. She wants to do this thing. And they connected me with 4 different families. And I met them, photographed them, and then drew them in charcoal.
Wow. So it's an incredible, incredible project. But when you got yourself into this, was that enough to sort of pick you up from this, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life phase?
Yep. As soon as the wheels kind of set in motion for this refugee project, I was all in. I felt completely engaged. I loved having total ownership over something and having to do everything from building out a website for it to running social media for it. And kind of, I felt like I was firing on all cannons. Like I could use every skill set and interest I had.
Did you choose only children or did you do families?
I met the families and I photographed only children.
Why did you make that decision?
I feel like if there's a way to change people's minds about the refugee quote issue, if you want to call it, it's kind of best proven with children because they had no say in the matter. You know, they're just here. And I think everybody should be in touch with their inner child and seeing a picture, a drawing of a child. There's something so universal about it, no matter how you feel or what kind of side of the immigration debate you're on. You look at those pictures of those kids and you just feel for them.
You mentioned you have no photography background, yet the pictures you took for the refugee project are incredible.
Thank you.
What was your technique when you took these pictures?
So I knew I wanted contrast. And so I thought to myself, well, I need to be in a dark space. I'll light them with a flashlight and then take their picture. And the day before I met the first family, I practiced with my mom in her closet. And it was different every time. The first family I photographed actually in a storage closet at the Church World Service office, which I would imagine for the family was scary.
Yeah.
To be like, here, come in this closet with the stranger. Let me close the door and turn the light off and I'm going to take your picture. And the other ones were in their homes. And sometimes I'd have to go into a bedroom and close the blinds and, you know, there'd still be some light peeking. So it wasn't like a consistent kind of setting or circumstance, but I had to make the best of what I had.
And you took the photos on your iPhone, right?
Yeah, sometimes I'd use my dad's because he had a 6 and I only had a 5.
It's incredible. I mean, like, I've looked at these photos. I'm going to link to it on our website also, but you would never guess it's from an iPhone. So I think a lot of people don't do something in life because they don't think they have the material to do it or they don't have X, Y, and Z. But you literally worked with what you had, which was an iPhone and a flashlight to make this beautiful project. Why did you think to yourself, okay, I'm going to wait for a real camera. I'm going to wait for this. What brought you to say, I got to do this right now?
I think it had to do with my complete lack of interest in learning how to use a camera.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to spend the time. I don't know, it's not interesting to me. So I thought, how can I do this? I had no budget. I mean, I funded the entire project myself out of really nothing. It's just what I had to do. I didn't really think twice about it. I did hire a photographer and a videographer to come with me to some of the stops on the tour because I was kind of busy and I did want professional documentation and high quality photos that I could use later. But yeah, I just did as much by myself as I could. So
you took these photos, and then what was your next step with them?
So pretty early on in this process, I ended up connecting with someone on Facebook, Cameron Sinclair, and I saw him post in a group that I'm part of that he was hosting Thanksgiving dinners for refugee families, and I thought, that's interesting. I reached out to him, and I didn't know what he did for a living. I just saw him post this, and I said, here's what I'm doing. I love what you're doing. Hi.
Yeah.
And we got to talking and I found out he worked for Airbnb and he said that Airbnb would want to support my project. They've done incredible work in the refugee space. So that was total fluke and coincidence or maybe fate. And I couldn't have picked a better brand company partner to align with. I mean, I had spent a lot of time thinking about who do I want to approach, who would I want to work with on this? Who would want to get behind this cause? And Airbnb is the best.
So what was the partnership that you two had?
They helped me get my pieces from the East Coast to the West Coast. They hosted the pieces at their headquarters in San Francisco. They rented a space for me not a warehouse, but like a space where I could show my pieces for 2 nights.
Wow.
And the first night they hosted a dinner with executives from Starbucks and Lyft, people kind of in that refugee pro-social space. And then the next night it was open to the public. Wow. So, yeah.
And this is all from you just randomly messaging somebody.
Yep.
That's incredible.
It was amazing.
So what happened next with the Refugee Project? Is it available for other people to see now?
It is. I have an Instagram for it. I have a website that I admittedly have not updated in a long time. I traveled, so I showed it in Washington, D.C. was the first place, and I partnered with 2 local companies there. One is a food service company that hires refugees to cook their native foods, and then they deliver it. So they came and catered, which is awesome, Foodini. And then I partnered with a local clothing company that employs refugees to make its clothing, called Dress Abstract. They hosted the exhibit in the penthouse of their office. And then I brought it to Lancaster, where my old art teacher hosted it at her new school that she started with my former English teacher. So that kind of came full circle. And then I showed it in San Francisco. Wow. And then I drove the pieces from San Francisco down to LA. And they're currently in my apartment.
So are you still taking these photos, or are you just keeping the ones you've had from the original project?
No, I'm not taking photos anymore. Yeah, I'm on to the next project.
Ooh. Are you able to tell us what that is?
Yeah, I would love to.
What is it?
It's called Me We. And basically, again, with Facebook, I put out a call for women who'd been sexually assaulted and would be willing to share their stories with me and the world. And I had a lot of responses. When people would reach out, I'd respond and send them my own story from when I was 17 that I wrote about a couple of years ago on Medium, just to make them, feel like we're in it together. I know what they've been through. And they sent me their story back in their own words, and I've asked for a selfie. So I have a total of 8 women from all over the country who've sent me a picture of themselves. And I'm drawing those pictures in a style called stippling, which is little tiny ink dots. So the concept is that each dot represents a woman and her story, and together these tens of thousands of dots make up the face of one of these women.
Wow. This is insanely cool, and also the most amazing shift in your life, right? I mean, did you ever think that this is where you would end up years after your DJ career?
No. I didn't. In the same way that I knew I wouldn't be in New York forever, I also knew the DJ thing wouldn't be forever. I certainly didn't want to be, like married with kids and DJing. It's not how I saw my life. But I did not know where I would end up after it.
So hearing the stories from the refugees and also the women who were talking to you about a sexual assault, how have those stories inspired you, changed you, made you a different person?
So starting with the refugee stories, it made me pause and really appreciate what I have and what I have not had to work for in the way that they have. And what was overwhelming to me and consistent was how grateful and happy they are to be here, how hard they work for not very much, and just kind of the strength of the family unit. There were 2 Ethiopian families I interviewed who were separated in refugee camps and reunited in my hometown and now live together, 13 of them under one roof, and it's just amazing. Wow. Amazing. And the kind of the younger kids are teaching the older kids and the parents English, and yeah.
What do you think these projects have done to you personally?
The MeWe project selfishly is a part of my own healing process. Telling my story was the first step, and reading other people's stories was hard for me. And now I think trying to inspire and encourage women who haven't told their story to come out with theirs is it's all part of my own process, and I'm hoping it will kind of kickstart theirs.
Are you going to be showing MeWe all over the country
That's
too?
the idea. I'm in the process of trying to find brands, partners, media partners to kind of team up with me and make it happen.
So cool. Well, your story is amazing, Claire, but I want to end on a quick lightning round where I'm just going to ask you a couple questions. My first question for you, you sort of answered, but when you were a kid, what did you think you would grow up to become?
A paleontologist.
Yes. Still the best answer. I just wanted to hear you say it again. What would you say your dream job is now?
An artist.
Wow. What advice would you have given yourself when you graduated NYU?
That you're on the right path. It's going to be circuitous, but it's the right one.
What advice do you wish you can give yourself now that you would actually listen to?
To be more proactive and aggressive when it comes to self-promotion. To get out there and meet people and tell my story and not be afraid to network.
Networking's so hard, though. What's the best advice anyone has ever given you?
To identify what you love to do and find a way to make money doing it. And it is much easier said than done, and I'm still working on part 2.
I think we all are. What's the number one thing you feel an urgent desire to accomplish this year?
To tour MeWe.
Yes, and we will be there to support you. What's your number one moment of failure? I
think I felt like a failure after my project ended in 2015, and I tried to do it myself. And I thought I just was not getting anywhere, and things when I had been a duo had been easier. That was the moment when I felt like, oh crap.
What did you learn from that feeling, though?
That just to try and listen to what the world is telling me. That if it feels like you're constantly swimming upstream, it's probably not the right thing.
Yeah. All right, fill in the blank. You're not getting any younger, so
go do what you want to do. Life is short.
I love it. Where can people find you, Claire?
Oh my God, I'm all over the internet.
Yay!
If you Google me, you'll get some embarrassing red carpet photos from a long time ago.
Make sure to post them.
Yeah. On Instagram, Claire Salvo, ClaireSalvo. Fun fact, Salvo is my middle name.
Is it really?
So people get confused when I introduce myself otherwise, and they're like, I thought you were Claire Salvo. What's this Schlissel thing? And I'm like, that's my real last name. But I use my middle name. I'm on Facebook, Claire Salvo Art. And the project with the refugees is called Refuge. And you can find that on Instagram at Refuge Exhibit.
Very cool. Where can they find the MeWe project?
That is on my personal page at Claire Salvo. That doesn't have its own Instagram. Cool. I thought about it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Claire. We will be sure to link to everything you said. And thank you again for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, you. Thank you for listening to the You're Not Getting Any Younger podcast. There are hundreds of thousands of pods out there, so thank you for listening to this one. You can find the show notes for this week's episode up on our website, anyyounger.com. Subscribe, rate, and review the You're Not Getting Any Younger podcast on iTunes so that other ears around the world can listen too. Oh, and join our secret You're Not Getting Any Younger Facebook group, where over 1,000 people are talking about how to disrupt their lives, for good reason, to make it count. Until next week, all my love, Jen Glantz.